Aurora James. What can I say about Aurora? She is, for me, she is truly a modern woman. She is curious. She is adventurous. She is beautiful. She is talented. And she assembles all of these qualities in the work that she does. So she's a designer. She has a successful line called, make sure I pronounce it right, you say?
Brother Vellies.
Okay, Brother Vellies. And she makes wonderful shoes and accessories. So Aurora, tell us your story. Where were you born, and what defined what you're doing now?
Whew. So I was born in Canada, in the suburbs outside of Toronto, but I was raised between Canada and Jamaica. My dad died when I was younger, and my mom got remarried, and we moved to Jamaica. And it was a really formative experience for me, for sure. But it was also really traumatic in a lot of ways. You know, it was an entirely different landscape that I wasn't familiar with. And, you know, my stepfather was really horrible. And so I had to learn really early on to A, take care of myself in a lot of ways, but B, also like find personal escape through my own imagination. And we had a lot of books. And so I would really get lost in books and learning about different countries and truly different women all over the world, and fashion books.
And what was the book that you remember? What was your big discovery book?
The Seven Wonders of the World.
Tell us about that.
I just remember always like going through the pages of this book and being like, and really like thinking about these seven wonders, you know, these like seven wonders of the world, and saying like, wow, like, you know, is there a person that gets to see all seven of these places? And like, what would I have to be in this life to be able to travel and see all these places? And who are the people who get to be surrounded by some of these like wonders of the world on a regular basis, and how might that shape you? And also like, what are the wonders that I have in my own life right around me, and how can I start appreciating things in a really, really spectacular way, and not pass by just a flower and say, oh, it's a flower, but really like see the whole universe in that flower.
So when did you, so clearly you had a vocation, clearly the exploring side of you was the important one. So did you go to fashion school?
Great question. I tried to go to fashion school. I tried to go to fashion school in Canada, and I didn't get in because I didn't have good enough math. So I ended up going to school for journalism, for writing.
I see.
Which suited me well because, as you said, I was curious. So I got to be curious for a little while for school. But then school didn't work out, and I left school. That was a pattern for me. I always left school. I even left high school.
And then what happened?
So after Jamaica, I moved back to Canada, and I was living in Canada. I interned everywhere at Next Modeling Agency because I wanted to be an agent, and you know, I really felt like models were sort of the modern day Cinderella, you know, and you could be these girls from anywhere in the world, and I always thought it was so amazing that they could be transported into this whole other kind of fantasy world, and I liked that side of the industry and part of fashion early on. And then I ended up working at this place called Fashion Television, and I did all of the like archiving of old footage from like the 80s and the 90s with this woman named Jeannie Becker. And she had hired me from my gym job. I was working at the gym, Diane. And then I fell in love with someone who lived in a different country than I did, who lived in America, who lived in Los Angeles. And so I moved from Toronto to LA, and everything kind of changed.
And then?
And then I didn't have any money, let alone like I had nothing, right? And so I started, what I did most often in order to pay my rent was I would go to like thrift stores, like St. Vincent de Paul's or anywhere that someone like donated things, the Jewish Women's Council. And I would find these clothes that no one really wanted so much that were all like $2. And then I would take them to like fancy consignment stores on Melrose, like Wasteland, and I would sell it back to them. And that was how I would pay my rent every month.
I
So
see.
that
So
was helpful.
you clearly had an eye and you were curious. And then I think Morocco played a big part in your life.
Yeah. So then once I was in LA for like a number of years, and then I came to New York, and I had started working like actual jobs at a certain point. And my father was born and raised in Ghana. And so I had always wanted to see different parts of Africa. And so I started saving all of the money that I would ever get, and I would travel. So I went to Morocco, I went to Nigeria, I went to South Africa and Namibia. Those were the first four places that I went. And when I was there, I thought often of my mom, because my mom really had this extensive wardrobe of different cultural clothing, and she would explain it to me. Like she would have mukluks that were made from Inuit people in Canada, and she Danish clogs, and she would explain why they used that wood, and that wood was local to them, and so they were able to make this clog, and it was strong. And so she taught me about culture through the lens of fashion. She also taught me about history through the lens of fashion, and really explained to me fashion being a tool of expression that was very powerful, and oftentimes a sort of covert way for women to communicate with each other about who they were in the world as well. So when I started traveling to Africa, I started paying attention to how women chose to dress themselves and what they chose to make. And I also started noticing that a lot of traditional cultural apparel was really dying out. And I that made me incredibly sad, because I was seeing, like, in fashion magazines, there would be all of this elaborate beading and embellishment, or these things that like looked and felt very African. But then when I was going to Africa, like those skill sets weren't really being preserved or promoted. And so there was one specific style of shoe that I really fell in love with, which is the South African Felschoen, which we call a Vellie. And I started working with a couple of workshops in Southern Africa to work on these shoe shapes and really tweak them and look at where they were getting the leather from and all the materials and the farmers and all of that. And I had $3,500 saved at the time. And so I put all of that into like making a little batch of shoes. And then I brought them back to New York City, to the Lower East Side, and sold them at the flea market there.
And that was the beginning of your business.
Yes, exactly.
And so when I met you through the Fashion Fund, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 2015, and I had started in the flea market in like 2013.
And then you went to the Fashion Fund, and you were adorable. You were so excited, and you showed beautiful African shoes that I believe you were making in Ethiopia.
Yes, in Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in Kenya. And then you started your business.
Yeah.
I believe you won. Did you win?
Yes, I tied. There was three of us, and we all won.
That's
it was me, Jonathan, Simkai, and Rio.
Exactly. And so what happened? I think it's nice for people to see that, a young girl who's interested in culture, who's interested in fashion, who's interested in traveling, travels to Africa, brings back a few batch of shoes, sells them to the flea market, and decide to turn it into a career. And so where are you now? What is your business? How does one find out about you? Mm-hmm. And also, I know you're very involved in philanthropy. Tell us about that too. So tell us about where your business is now, and where does everybody can find your shoes and like that.
Yeah. Well, it was a process, and I was so grateful for the fashion fund because when I applied, I really was just applying as an exercise and hoping that someone would look at my work. Truly, truly, I never thought that I would get in. And when I got in, I remember someone being like, wow, like, do you think that there's a chance? Like, do you think that there's like a chance that, you might like do well? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, the idea of winning had never even crossed my mind. I was just so grateful for an opportunity to be included because I was doing something that I loved so much. And I also knew meant so much to so many of the artisans we were working with. So I was just over the moon the whole time with gratitude. I never thought it was possible.
And then you won and you started your business. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but I remember because over the years, I sometimes worked with artisans. And one of the responsibility that I always felt is that, oh my God, I don't want to build too much expectation. I don't want them to feel like, oh, this is it. And yet you manage. So explain to us how you work with the local people and what are you able to do for them?
Yeah. Well, I think the hugest part of it for me was actually always about going there and being there, right? Like we had started it in the workshop that I work with in South Africa. I mean, I talked to them this morning, we're talking every day because of COVID and all that jazz, but it's like, we really we're in this together. They took a chance on me as much as I took a chance on them, as much as the world and you took a chance on me. We were all placing bets on each other. And so us growing and figuring things out, it felt like a community-based thing. So I think part of it was because we sort of started together. And even with Kenya, it's always just about taking it one season at a time, and also kind of viewing it as a collaboration and being more malleable in terms of what's possible, I think also, and because a lot of the work that we've done has been rooted in things that were traditional and already intuitive to them versus me being like, make this, and it's completely different than what they do. And we did, don't get me wrong, I haven't, I'm not perfect on this business model because for a while we were trying to make a lot of things that weren't intuitive to them with them, and some of that kind of backfired. But just always having that dialogue and trying to figure it out and knowing when to build and knowing when to sort of stay. And, we have this whole other program right now called Something Special where people subscribe to every month. And it's these small artisan things. So we did this beautiful mug from Oaxaca in Mexico that's made by a group of women there that I visited and fell in love with. And we've been able to support them through this pandemic, through Something Special, which is super incredible. So it's really about working with different communities in a way that makes sense for them.
So your website, so you sell on directly to the consumer on your website. Mm-hmm. Remind us again of the name of your website.
The website is brothervellies.com. And that is where the majority of our sales happen. We also have a store, which is reopening right now in Brooklyn. And we sell at a handful of boutiques also around the world and across America. But our website is really sort of that hub for all things.
And so tell me now what you're doing about the 15%, what you decided to do here.
Yeah. So when everything started happening with the pandemic and then George Floyd being murdered, I was seeing a lot of messages on Instagram and through email that were all these businesses that were saying we stand with you, and I was reading it, but I wasn't necessarily feeling it. And so I think as a Black woman and then also as a Black business owner, I said, okay, how can I attach a number to this feeling and kind of bring them together? And I sort of said, okay, Black people in America are almost 15% of the population. And so it would make sense for these large retailers to commit to spending 15% of their purchasing power on Black-owned businesses. And so I asked them to do that. And that's how the 15% pledge was born. I just wrote it out on a piece of paper and what the idea was. And I posted it on Instagram. And within 10 days, Sephora agreed to take the pledge.
Wow.
Which is really exciting. And Rent the Runway has also taken the pledge. And
so the pledge means, explain, what is the pledge?
Yeah, so the 15% pledge is a call to action for retailers to commit 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses. So now at Sephora, 15% of the beauty products that they carry there, 15% of the products are going to be created by Black women, Black people. And that is incredibly exciting to me because most stores right now have about 1% from Black-owned businesses.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Can you verify that?
Yes. So what's amazing is at the pledge now, we're a full nonprofit, and there's a whole little troop of us, and it's really incredible. And so twice a year, we're going to be doing audits with all of the businesses who've taken the pledge and actually make sure that they're hitting those benchmarks because it can't happen overnight. You know, it's a huge undertaking.
Of course. You have to find them. You have to, of course.
Yes. And it's incredibly exciting because it's really meaningful. And as soon as we started the pledge, I started getting all of these women in my inbox that are like, oh my goodness, like this company just reached out to me and this company just reached out to me. And there are a lot of businesses that would have never had the opportunity before, because they didn't know how. And, even with fashion, I'm sure you understand, it's a really hard industry.
Very, especially right now.
Especially right now.
So, you are now how old?
Me?
How old are you?
Oh,
Yes,
I'm turning 36 on Sunday.
Oh my God, you look like you're 24. All right, so Aurora is such a beautiful name because it's the name of dawn, right? So the dawn is a magical moment when the light pushes the dark away, and that's when you were born. And I feel like you were born under a good star and you carry a good star. And today you are a young Black woman, successful in fashion, but also who helps, people all around the world who are crafts, who still have a craft. And it's not that you get inspired by them and you do what people call cultural appropriation, but what you do is you work with them and you create these collaboration. And you also create a trend, because I remember I have a pair of your shoes. I love them, And so where are you today? And now that you have become a little bit of a role model, where are you going? What would you like to do for the world?
Well, I have to tell you also that my middle name is Dawn. So you're very spot on with that analogy, Diane. And I was born sleeping as well. And my Aurora.
What do you mean you were born sleeping?
I was asleep when I came out of my mom initially.
Oh, really? Is that possible?
Yes, it's possible. It's rare, but it's possible. But Sleeping Beauty's name was Princess Aurora. So there's also that. I think I knew that there was going to be a lot to do in this life. So I wanted to get all the sleep while I could.
All right.
But next for me, I do definitely want to keep growing Brother Vellies. I mean, that's a major goal of mine for sure. As you know, I started it with $3,500 and it's so incredible all that we've been able to accomplish, which I couldn't be more excited about. And we're launching some other products and expanding in different categories this year, which I'm really over the moon about. I think that that's going to be really incredible. And I hope to be able to open more stores. And I know that people think that I'm crazy because of the pandemic. No one really wants to store right now. But I think that our physical spaces, when they're able to be open, have also meant a lot to people. We met up there for the Women's March the first time, and a lot of, safe space creation in order for women to meet and talk about things that are important to them, and also organize around, making sure that all of our needs are met in a larger way.
So what is your dream, Aurora? What would you like to tell the 18, the 20-year-old woman who is listening to you now? What is it that you would like? What's your piece of advice? What is it that you want to tell them?
Well, I would say that for me, I got a lot of bruises along the way. And I think that at times I almost felt like I was like bad fruit, that I had been bruised up. Well, women are expected to sort of be this like perfect thing. And I think, my life was very different than perfect. And I got bruised along the way in a number of different ways, some accidentally, some self-inflicted, some by other people. And I think with fashion in particular, there's so much pressure on us to be so perfect, especially to continue to project this idea of luxury, and what that means and aspiration and all of that. And I think for me, it's the idea that, you can still be aspirational in your flaws. And really the things that I've prioritized the most in my life are happiness and freedom. And they're two of the hardest things for women to get and have and hold and understand. And once you add being a business owner on top of that, there's all of these expectations around, are you going to grow your business to $1 billion? Because that's what being successful.
That is not a good idea. What is important is that you are authentic and you stand for what you stand. And so, Aurora, what do you stand for?
I think I stand for happiness on your own terms and success on your own terms, and really listening to your intuition and understanding that your intuition is a valid language.
That's right. Be true to yourself and own it. You own your imperfection, they become your assets. I understand that completely. So thank you so much for talking to me, and continued success. And you're a beautiful girl, you're a beautiful soul, and you have a little magic wand that you use all around the world. So God bless you, Aurora. You wear your name really, really well. I love you.
Thank you so much. I love you too. And thank you for being there for me always.
Thank you. Bye.